Welcome to a new unit, American Political Ideologies and Beliefs. We start Unit 4 with Chapter 7 on Public Opinion, Ideology, Participating, and Voting. Glad you could join me for this chapter. Now, if you're in the online PDF textbook, it is Chapter 7. If you're in the hard copy textbook, that is Chapters 4 and 8 in this chapter. And we start off with a little bit of a quiz from the citizenship test. Do you know more than the average American citizen? Could you answer the questions that are here? We'll come back to that at the end for the answers. But right now, in this section of this chapter, we're going to look at political culture. So thank you for joining me. Here we go. Think about it. What is the term, when you hear the term conservative, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? What is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the term liberal? And how about libertarian? So when you think about those things, what from culture and socialization lead you to the thoughts that you have when you hear those terms? And we are socialized in a lot of different ways in terms of those connotations, in terms of those meanings behind those terms, those words related to our political beliefs, our ideologies. But we start with American political culture, looking at this idea of how we first come to know what it is about political culture and how we're kind of drawn into it. What is the draw? So for most students, it's either running for a school election, or it is going with your parents to vote, or maybe it is campaigning with a parent who's volunteering for a candidate or running for office themselves. And this describes part of our culture in terms of how is it that we come to know all about politics and government and political culture. And many times it is an elementary school experience or an early on experience of something that happened that we recall and we remember. Maybe it's seeing something on television related to an election or some type of an event that brings us back to the days of early knowledge of political culture. So let's define it. What is this actually? Well, it's a widely shared belief system about values, norms, what we hold dear, more than any other, what relationships we have to government and to each other. And this culture is something that we share. We all believe in freedom. We all believe in liberty. We all believe in equality. How we go about carrying out those things may be very different, but at least we value those political values, those overall parts of the political culture. And that really centers on our democratic values, what we hold dear in that regard. Things like, as I mentioned, liberty, the idea of individualism, working hard and earning the money that you keep, paying your fair share of taxes, and then the rest is yours. That economic individualism that we talk about, free enterprise and rule of law. Nobody is above the law. And the idea of limited government, that it is given the power that it has by the people, and the people, as Rousseau said, can take it away. And this is what we hold dear in terms of that political culture. Now, how we go about carrying this out, how we legislate that, is very ideological, very different in terms of how conservatives or liberals or libertarians or socialists would carry that out. But these are the shared values that come from natural rights. The idea of John Locke and the natural rights theory. They're given to us by a higher power. It's not government that gives us these rights, these rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property, if you will. This work ethic that we have, the idea of economic individualism, doesn't come from government. It comes from hard work and labor and sharing in the values of working hard and being able to reap the fruits of our labor as a result of what we're doing here. That's an 18th century concept coming from the idea that if we work hard and we put all of our effort into it, we will be successful. We will be able to see something come from it. And that's really the driver here in terms of what we see from political culture today. We also see see things like respect, democracy, the will of the people, the popular sovereignty, the will of the people have spoken, and how do we hold that dear? The idea of justice, the rule of law, this idea of patriotism or idealism, and civic duties, that we do what is necessary and what will help society as part of the common good, that we hold that dear. And then we are socialized about those values through our family and schools, teachers and friends, colleges and universities, professors, and those we come into contact with, programs that we advocate for, and people that we help get elected and help stay in office because we believe in the systems of government and the political agenda that they do. Our churches and our religion has an impact on this as well. And the media definitely plays a role. The role of the media. We have just a chapter devoted later to talking about the role of the media in Unit 5, the role that they play there. So all of these help us socialize. When we first learn about politics and government, it's one of these 5 that usually introduce us to that. It's a family member taking us with them to go vote, or passing out pamphlets on a campaign, or blowing up balloons at a parade on behalf of a candidate or something. So there's a lot of ways that we are socialized through that. The media definitely plays a role in that today. And then we have a number of factors that lead into this in terms of how we start to see these values play out, especially as we age. They are more important to us as we get older, and we can't do the things we could more easily do when we were younger. So we rely on this aging society to have a government that is looking out for us, that is taking care of us in some way, shape, or form, and that will be there for us when we're older. And all of the things we paid into the system will help us later on. And through the generations, the idea is that these values are held, that as we change and as society changes throughout time, that our belief system will hold fast to voting patterns and our political beliefs, that while we may become more aligned with our viewpoint and our political values in terms of our agenda. But we see this isn't just us; it's a generation of people that are tying into this, that are really seeing this as part of our overall political culture. And religion, as I mentioned, plays a huge part in this. We see that in many elected officials that we have, and their focus on religion, their focus on the importance of their religion in politics, and what impact it has had upon them. We see this with data. We can prove it with evidence that religion has a major aspect in our political culture in terms of why people believe what they do and why they carry out the agenda of policies that they do, all based on this idea of political culture. It comes from this Protestant work ethic I mentioned, this idea of a Puritan heritage that really leads us to focus on political change, to promote it, to subscribe to that political agenda, and wanting leaders who are going to not just be non-religious or non-partisan, but to be religious and promote those policies in their practices, in their leadership, and some of them even going so far as to look at faith-based solutions to some of the problems that ail our society today. And so these are the things where we see religion impacting our political culture and our values. And this is where we start to part ways, right? Because this is where we start to see that there's some definite divides in terms of where we go and what agendas we follow, and we start getting into the ideologies of these aspects, the ideologies in terms of what belief systems do we use to carry these out. Now, this has historical roots. The idea of political culture, these values of liberty and freedom and equality, don't just come out of thin air. They come from our society, from what we have held dear up to this point. The idea of revolution was about rights that we felt we had, that King George wasn't giving to us. Our culture is about adversarial in nature in terms of authority and the idea of righting the wrongs through the courts and using the courts as part of that to make sure that that justice and freedom prevail. Those are great examples in terms of the history that has shown us over time the importance of this political culture, these values we hold dear. Now, how we go carrying that out is where we see a lot of differences in ideology and belief systems. The idea of equality is very important. But when we look at equality of opportunity versus equality of results, how do we save a person by using the welfare system? But how do we teach them to grow and learn and develop new skills that they can then learn how to swim on their own and be able to navigate the waters over time and without the system. And so these are things that start to lead into our belief systems and our ideologies in terms of how this political culture is carried out. We see this with the American dream, the idea of right to property, right? The right to life, liberty, property, ultimately going to be the pursuit of happiness. But sometimes these values conflict in terms of how ideology is carried out. Some may want a more urban setting in terms of where they live. Others may want a quieter setting, more of a rural or a suburban setting. And again, how those values are carried out begins to show the stratification of our ideologies, our beliefs in terms of the how. How do we carry these things out? How do we make sure that these are the values that we hold dear and that they're carried out in some way, shape, or form? Homeownership is a very valuable part of the American dream. We see it time and again through all household incomes, all across the board. We see it as an important aspect. People want to have a slice of life in terms of their little slice of heaven. The importance of having a stake in the game in terms of that home ownership as part of the dream and being able to participate in that. And then, but so many people don't get that opportunity that are continually striving for it but never quite getting there. And how do we go about trying to level that playing field, especially when we look at it in terms of race and ethnicity, especially as we look at it and we start to break it down in terms of education, the focus on education that will help many, and lack of education keeps those from seeing that full potential. We definitely see that playing out in history and in government and politics as part of that political culture, those beliefs and the belief systems we see there. We've seen this time and again, from the industrial age to the Great Depression, to the New Deal, to the military-industrial complex of the post-war World War II era, to the Cold War. We continue to see the impact of this history on our political culture, really helping us to rally around the flag once again. 9/11 brought us back to that mindset of rallying around the flag. The idea of the importance of really kind of everybody coming together in order to help our society grow and improve and become a better society as a result of that. We've seen this time and again throughout history, where our political culture is tested and challenged in terms of what we see there. And regardless of how we see that government's role in the economy, we know that we have these shared values, these cultural values that are much greater than the tactics, than the details in terms of, well, how does the government carry that out? How does the government shape and mold that into something that is of the ideology and the belief that we actually want it to be? So that's significant here. We see government taking a role in the economy, for instance, in terms of what we call a mixed market economy. We have government involved, but only to a certain extent, only when it's involving regulation or safety or concerns about someone's well-being do we see government involved. Otherwise, we want government to get out of the way. We espouse a very laissez-faire type of approach. And we don't want government to be excessively regulatory or overly burdensome on business and getting in the way of that. So we see that playing out in society, and that Economic individualism I talked about, the idea of a capitalistic structure, really supports this mixed market economy. Government steps in order to provide for the safety of its people, and then it steps back, it steps away, so that government can do its thing. And why do we do this? Well, because over time we've seen that sometimes government can't be trusted. That, as Rousseau said, we need to break the bonds of that social contract in order to look at this from the perspective that maybe government needs to be changed, that the leaders in our government need to be swept out and new ones need to be brought in. And so Rousseau says we can break that social contract in terms of elections. We can elect new individuals. The idea of an electoral earthquake, shattering the status quo of who's in charge and really changing that up. Now, we've seen since the post-World War II era a steady decline in the trust that people have in Washington. President Reagan said once that the most dangerous words in American English are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And that really was tying into a mistrust of government that was already taking shape since Watergate, since Vietnam, since some of the scandals that we saw in the 20th century. And, take that fast forward to something like 9/11. Government is supposed to be there to protect us and to keep us secure, and they weren't. And look what happened. And so how can we trust government to do this to us again and again? So we see this continual shift in terms of a mistrust in government at one point or another, at least some of the time, if not most of the time, in those terms. And all of this takes shape in terms of how people respond to government, how they connect to government, how they see what government can do for them and what government isn't doing for them, how they're being left out, many people being left behind, the struggles for equality and the struggles for justice in a 21st century society lead to a lot of this decline in trust because maybe that American dream isn't working for them. It's not happening for them. Or a good example from this summer's Black Lives Matter movement, that the police aren't treating everybody the same. It's not a fair, a procedurally just due process system in terms of how that's carried out, as we talked about in the last chapter. And that leads to a decline in trust. We have government continually letting us down, continually doing things behind our backs and looking out for themselves and trying to benefit themselves and not the society as a whole. And that really leads to a decline in what trust we had in government. And that begins to shape our culture. Does it rock the foundation of liberty, equality, and justice? Well, it does have an impact. But again, a lot of that is being shaped in terms of the belief system that we're going to talk about coming up. The idea of the beliefs that we hold dear, how we go about carrying that out, how a conservative versus a liberal versus a libertarian will carry that out. And that is where we're going to go in the next section.